Okay. Yeah, just put something on the screen, right? It's more so a placeholder. Maybe it should be intermission. Works a little better. Fine. I wonder if I have more options for this. Nope. I suppose I can hit record too. Oh, okay. I have some people joining in now. I'm not gonna get started just yet. We're gonna wait a couple more minutes, and yeah, we'll see what happens soon. Nope. I can give it to like 6:05, but until then, um, I don't want to just have you guys sitting in silence. So, I guess I can get started giving you a brief overview of what I plan on doing with this workshop series. So I plan on streaming every Tuesday and Thursday until we finish with the book. And if if you're still interested and you're still following the channel, I'll be picking up a new subject with another book and going through that as well. And if you'd like, you can get the book at a discount on my Twitch channel. There should be an info section on the channel, or you can just watch along as I go through the book as well. I planned on going through it as like a sort of read along, um, but depending on how it goes, I'll get a feel for what works out better. But I guess the idea is to go through the contents of the book and also obviously do the examples as well live, and that way if anyone has questions they can go ahead and ask, and we can also work through some parts of the book together as well. So I've actually gone through most of this book already. I've gone up to about chapter 9. I haven't finished it yet. But I definitely wanted to get started with this. I think it's going to help motivate me to uh, complete the book. And um, I just thought this would be a good idea to help some people gain exposure to like full stack web development. And yeah, so it doesn't look like there are more people joining yet, but I guess I'm going to get started soon. Um, and today, really, there's not a real big objective. The first chapter is really more reading based, and I could tell, we're not going to sit here for 2 hours and listen to me read for 2 hours the first chapter. So what I plan on doing is really just, um, oh, hey, sorry, Bali Santos. Nice to meet you. That's good to hear. Hope everyone's doing good right now. I know everyone's either going to school or working from home right now, which can be kind of difficult. So hope everyone's doing all right. Yeah. So um, instead of just reading along this whole entire thing, I'm going to sum up some parts of it, and I'll read from parts that I think have important detail that I can't explain in better words myself. And other than that, yeah. If you guys have any questions, I'll also talk about some projects that I've worked on before using the mean stack. Now, there's no Angular involved in this, but I'll get to that as well. But this is what we're going to be building. Even this is not all the way complete according to how the book has it by the end. But we'll go over this a little bit too. And I guess I can talk about myself a little bit and maybe learn something from some of you guys too. Some of you are interested in mean stack development, or if you've already um, gotten some experience with web development in the past. And yeah, just let me know. So I guess to start off, I started this book while I was in college. I just recently graduated in December. I've always been into web development, but I really wanted to get into full stack. And I started with the mean stack because JavaScript was one of the first languages that I learned, and the entire stack is built in JavaScript. So it's all the frameworks are all based on JavaScript. So it's one language from front end through all the way through to the back end. Um, I guess we can start, reading the book now. And if you guys have any questions or you want to have dialogue, you just want to talk, just go ahead and text and I'll read it. And yeah, so the beginning of this book basically just explains what full stack development is all about. Right here, these are the different parts of the stack. So MongoDB is the database. Express is the web framework, so it basically kind of sets everything up in Node.js for us. So that way it's easier for us to get started on development. And you'll see later on, maybe not today, maybe I'll show you actually a little bit today. Just give you a good idea of what Express kind of looks like, but it handles like routing and stuff like that, which we'll also explain. Angular is the front end framework. Angular is a lot of people say it has a steep learning curve. I don't think it's too bad, but we're going to learn how to use Angular and also the language that drives Angular, TypeScript, which is based on JavaScript, and Node.js, which is the web server. A little bit of history here. I guess not all too important for, I guess, learning the actual framework, but it's nice to know. But um, if you're interested, let me know. I can read it, or you can just, if you want to get the book yourself and look at it, it's also another option. But other than that, so Angular has gone through, I guess, a bunch of different versions. Angular 2, I guess, is like the big improvement, and now we're up to 7.1. That's what we're up to, or at least from when this book was released. It's probably something more recent now. If you look at it, I spelled it wrong. Let's see what version of Angular it is. 9.1.9. That's where we're at. All right. So why learn full stack? It sounds like a lot of work. It is, but it's also rewarding. Creating fully functioning data-driven websites and applications all by yourself. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do it, right? Um, it goes into a history of it. Before there was full stack, you had people who were specializing in back end, people specializing in front end, people who kind of did a little bit of both, but were like, I guess in that sense, jack of all trades, master of none, right? And then here comes full stack development and I guess the introduction of frameworks to make that possible. Can kind of get through this too. Let me know if like you want me to actually read uh, the details behind this. That was kind of my intention with this, but I'm gonna kind of try to gauge the direction I should go based on the audience. So you guys give me feedback. Just send something in the chat box. Um, but for now, I feel like it might be more beneficial if we get more into the code first and actually get started as opposed to just all extra reading because I can only imagine that's kind of boring. Um, but if there's like important things that are important on the technical side that I have to read, of course I'll read that detail as well. But for now, this is more background, why full stack development is cool and stuff, how they separated it out and how it works. Angular, the front end framework, uses TypeScript, Node.js and Express are JavaScript based, and then MongoDB is the database. Um, I suppose maybe it would be important because if you're very new to this, you probably don't know about any of this stuff. Let's see. Okay, so we can skip over that. So far, it's really just going over full stack development. The point of it is that you build out the front end, which is visual, which is what you see, what the user will see when they come to your website. So, how everything's organized, the colors, all that good stuff. And then on the application server, there's all the logic, how everything actually works. So how does it know that this location is this far away, or how many stars it should be putting for the rating, stuff like that. What amenities it has, and how it knows that. That's all part of the application logic, right? And then the database where it gets some of the data, right? So how many stars is stored somewhere, the name of the location is stored somewhere, the reviews are stored somewhere, right? And then we have reviews here. Currently, the add review function doesn't work because I didn't get that far, but we'll get to that too. So Node.js, I guess I'll read this part so that way we have a good understanding of what Node.js is. Node.js is the end in mean. Being last doesn't mean that it's the least important. It's the foundation of the stack. In a nutshell, Node.js is a software platform that allows you to create your own web server and build web applications on top of it. Node.js isn't itself a web server, neither is it a language. It contains a built-in HTTP server library, meaning that you don't need to run a separate web server program such as Nginx, Apache, or Internet Information Services. This gives you greater control of how your web server works, but also increases the complexity of getting it up and running, particularly in a live environment. With With PHP, for example, you can easily find a shared server web host running Apache and send some files over FTP, file transfer protocol. And all being well, your site is running. This works because the web host has already configured Apache for you and others to use. With Node.js, this isn't the case. Because you configure the Node.js server when you create your application, many of the traditional web hosts are behind the curve on Node.js support. But several new platform as a service hosts are springing up to address this need, including Heroku, which is what we're going to be using, Nodejitsu, and DigitalOcean. The approach of deploying live sites on the platform as a service host is different from the old FTP model, but easy when you get the hang of it. You'll be deploying a site live to Heroku as you go through the book. An alternative approach to hosting a Node.js application is doing it yourself on a dedicated server or virtual server from a cloud provider like AWS or Azure, on which you can install anything you need. But production server administration is a topic for another book. And although you could independently swap out any of the other components with an alternative technology, if you take Node.js out, everything that sits on top of it changes. Okay, so it's a very good explanation of Node.js. They also detail what platforms we're going to be using to host our website as well. Um, and yeah, so let's get moving on to the next part. All right, JavaScript. One of the main reasons why Node.js is gaining broad popularity is that you code it in a language that most web developers are already familiar with, JavaScript. Until Node was released, if you wanted to be a full-stack developer, you had to be proficient in at least two languages, JavaScript on the front end and something like PHP or Ruby on the back end. Microsoft's foray into server-side JavaScript. In the late 1990s, Microsoft released Active Server Pages, now known as Classic ASP. ASP could be written in VBScript or JavaScript, but the JavaScript version didn't take off, largely because at the time, a lot of people were familiar with Visual Basic, which Visual Basic looks like. Oh, sorry, which Visual Basic script looks like. Many books and online resources were for VBScript, so it snowballed into becoming the standard language for Classic ASP. With the release of Node.js, you can use what you already know and put it to use on the server. One of the hardest parts of learning a new technology like this is learning the language. But if you already know some JavaScript, you're one step ahead. There's a learning curve when you're taking on Node.js, even if you're an experienced front-end JavaScript developer. The challenges and obstacles in server-side programming are different from those on the front end, but you'll face those challenges no matter what technology you use. On the front end, you may be concerned about making sure that everything works in a variety of browsers on different devices. On the server, you're more likely to be aware of the flow of the code to ensure that nothing gets held up and that you don't waste system resources. I'm going to skip some of this. Right here's pretty important. So they use this bank teller example to describe how a single-threaded server works against, some multi-threaded servers. So the idea behind, I guess, multi-threaded is that each bank teller counts as a thread, right? So you have bank teller 1 and bank teller 2. And in this example, you have a bunch of customers. Right now, it's just Sally and Simon who need to make different requests, right? And so the way a multi-threaded server would work is that this thread by itself would completely handle all the transactions that are coming from one customer. And so he would go to the safe, deposit the money, and count the total, and then give him back the number that he has for his total as one person. And he would also individually attend to Sally's request as well. So those two different threads are completely dedicated to those two separate customers. But in the single-threaded approach, which is explained here, where you have one bank teller instead, what they do is that Sally will come to this bank teller, but so will Simon. When Sally comes in first, he redirects her request to the appropriate resource, and same thing with Simon, also redirects this request to the appropriate resource. That way, the requests are coming in on one thread, but they're being handled by the other resources and still getting basically the same job done, but just with one thread. That's kind of a sum up of it. If you guys want to hear exactly what the book says, obviously they can put it in better words than I can, which is why they wrote the book. But I can read this little part real quick. So a Node.js server is single-threaded and works differently from a multi-threaded server. Rather than giving each visitor a unique thread and a separate silo of resources, the server has every visitor join the same thread. A visitor and thread interact only when necessary, when the visitor is requesting or something or the thread is responding to a request. Returning to the bank teller analogy, there'd be only one teller who deals with all customers. But rather than taking on and managing all requests end to end, the teller delegates any time-consuming task to back office staff and deals with the next request. This figure illustrates this process, how this process might work using the two requests from the multi-threaded example. So, yep. So that's what's cool about Node.js. It's very efficient when it comes to resources on the server. They do explain that it is important to have good design, which is what this blocking versus non-blocking code is. So I'll read this part. So with the single-threaded model, it's important to remember that all of your users use the same central process. To keep the flow smooth, you need to make sure that nothing in your code causes a delay, blocking another operation. An example would be if the bank teller has to go to the safe to deposit the money for Simon, in which case Sally would have to wait to make her request. Similarly, if your central process is responsible for reading each static file, such as CSS, JavaScript, or images, it won't be able to process any other requests, thus blocking the flow. Another common task that's potentially blocking is interacting with the database. If your process is going to the database each time it's asked, be it searching for data or saving data, it won't be able to do anything else. For the single-threaded approach to work, you must make sure that your code is non-blocking. The way to achieve this is to make any blocking operations run asynchronously, preventing them from blocking the flow of your main process. So basically, in much better terms, you have to ensure that your code is not doing any blocking operations where a resource is being hogged up by one request, and now you have a line of other requests waiting on that resource. Okay, using pre-built packages, using npm. So when you first install Node.js, you'll get something called Node Package Manager, which will allow you to install other tools that you can use while you're developing. One of the first ones we're going to get is called NodeMon, and it's going to help us with our development by whenever we run the command, it'll automatically refresh whatever we're working on in the browser every time we save. All right, so introducing Express, the framework. So Express is the E in mean. Because Node.js is a platform, it doesn't prescribe how it should be set up or used, which is one of its great strengths. But every time you create websites and web applications, quite a few common tasks need doing. Express is a web application framework for Node.js that's designed to perform these tasks in a well-tested, repeatable way. Easing your server setup. As already noted, Node.js is a platform, not a server, which allows you to get creative with your server setup and do things that you can't do with other web servers. It also makes getting a basic website up and running harder. Express abstracts away this difficulty by setting up a web server to listen to incoming requests and return relevant responses. In addition, it defines a directory structure. One folder is set up to serve static files in a non-blocking way. The last thing you want is for your application to have to wait when someone requests a CSS file. You should configure this yourself directly in Node.js, but Express does it for you. So basically, they're easing the work for us. They're making the job easier on us, which is nice, which is what frameworks are made to do. Routing URL responses. One of the great features of Express is that it provides a simple interface for directing an incoming URL to a certain piece of code. Whether this interface will serve a static HTML page, read from a database, or write to a database doesn't matter. The interface is simple and consistent. Let me know if I'm losing you guys. If this is kind of boring, then I understand. We can actually just start getting into the actual action items. So if some of you are watching along with the intention of actually doing some of this work as well, I don't want to keep you waiting with all the reading and stuff. We should just kind of get into it. But let me know your thoughts in the chat, and yeah, I'll be sure to respond appropriately. Here we just talk about MongoDB next. Ability to store and use data is vital for most applications. In the mean stack, the database of choice is MongoDB, the M in mean. MongoDB fits into the stack incredibly well. Like Node.js, it's renowned for being fast and scalable. So relational databases versus document stores. So MongoDB is considered a document store, I guess, and relational databases are the ones that you're used to with tables like SQL. If you used a relational database before, even a spreadsheet, you'll be used to the concept of columns and rows. Typically, a column defines the name and data type, and each row is a different entry. For an example, this is what a relational database would look like. MongoDB is not like that. MongoDB is a document store. The concept of rows still exists, but columns are removed from the picture. Rather than a column defining what should be in the row, each row is a document, and this document both defines and holds the data itself. This table shows a collection of documents, how a collection of documents might be listed. And this is kind of like what MongoDB might look like when we start writing our schemas for MongoDB. All right, and let's talk about how it goes from, I guess the source documents is BSON, which is binary JSON, JavaScript serialized object notation. Don't worry for now if you're not fully familiar with JSON. Check out the relevant section in Appendix D. So we'll get to that stuff too. All right, more than just a database. Yep. Mongoose is one of the tools that we're going to be using for doing the data modeling and creating our schemas. We'll also get to that. Um, but I just kind of wanted to go over some of this first chapter to ease everyone into this book and into this content, and also give decent background. But I also don't want to spend too much time here talk about Angular, the front end framework. So a lot of this stuff is going to be explained in much greater detail later on throughout the book. So I suppose the best way to start now, we talk about some of the other stuff we're going to be using. Um, yeah, we'll talk about Heroku as well. This is images of what the app will look like. Um, the data that we'll be putting in there is technically fake data, but for development purposes and just for creating this project, book has us create this fake data. This explains how all the components work together. And yeah, and that's just chapter 1. So chapter 2, I believe, will have us start getting into installing some of these frameworks and getting started. So this explains the REST API. So actually, I think this is an important part too. So what is a REST API? REST stands for Representational State Transfer, which is an architectural style rather than a strict protocol. REST is stateless. It has no idea of any current user state or history. API is an abbreviation for Application Program Interface, which enables applications to talk to one another. In the case of the web, an API is normally a set of URLs that respond with data when called in the correct manner with the correct information. A REST API is a stateless interface to your application. In the case of the mean stack, the REST API is used to create a stateless interface to your database, enabling a way for other applications such as Angular SPA, which stands for Single Page Application, to work with the data. In other words, you create a collection of structured URLs that return specific data when called. All right, so common mean stack architecture. Let's look for our first action item. And again, if you're curious about any of this content and you want me to go over it, definitely let me know. Feedback is very important, especially since this is my first time doing this. But I want you guys to see how we actually get started here. So the book is actually organized very well, and it will take us step by step and tell us what our action items are as we go through the book in sequential order. So, like I said, all these details are important, but if you want me to go over them, I definitely can. Okay, so in this section, this part of the book, based on our mean stack architecture, we're designing how we're going to build out the web page from the beginning. How this book goes about this approach is that it builds it from the front end all the way through to the back. So we start off basically visually how we want all of our pages and all our functionality to look like, and we hard code that data. And then as we're building the website out after we've done with the front end and we start moving towards application logic and doing things in Node.js and in Express, we start to move things closer and closer towards the back end and then back into the database. That way it's a data-driven application. So we start off with the visual and then go into some of the controls and even go even further back and then start modeling some of this data and then entering this data into the database. That's what that picture basically is about. This is how we're designing our web page right now. So I guess right now, what I can have some of you guys do is definitely install. I personally like using Visual Studio Code. If you have some other text editor that you like using, like Sublime Text, or I'm not sure if Atom supports everything or not, but I personally like using Visual Studio Code. And I think it's a great IDE if you don't already have one. And install Visual Studio Code. And I'll be starting this project over from zero as well with you guys. So I'll be creating this over again. So you don't have to worry about that. But um, highly recommend you guys get Visual Studio Code. You can pick any IDE you want though. Yeah, so that would be I guess the first thing that you can do is install your IDE of choice. All right. So they talk about the three options: an Express in Node.js application, an Express in Node.js application with additional Angular components, which is what we end up building later on. And we also, towards the very end of the book, create a completely an application completely built in Angular. So we actually end up doing all three. So that way we get experience with the entire stack. So right here they explain that you'll be building the architectures in the order in which they're shown in Figure 2.11, starting with a Node.js and Express application and then adding some Angular before refactoring to an Angular SPA. Although this isn't necessarily how you might build a site normally, it gives you a great opportunity to learn all aspects of the mean stack. In section 2.5, we'll talk about this approach and walk through the plan in a bit more detail. All right, so this is more explaining what the end product will look like. Breaking development into stages. Build an application on the mean stack. Learn about the different layers of the stack as you go. So those are the two aims of this book. All right, you'll approach the project in the way that you'd go about building a rapid prototype, but with a few tweaks to give you the best coverage of the whole stack. Start by looking at the 5 stages of rapid prototype development, and then see how to use this approach to build up Locator layer by layer, focusing on the different technologies as you go. Rapid prototype development stages. The following section breaks the process into stages, which lets you concentrate on one thing at a time, increasing your chances of success. We find that this approach works well for making an idea a reality, which I think is pretty accurate. That's kind of what I was doing here with like my own idea, with my own app idea. Please don't cringe too hard at the name. I couldn't come up with like an actual website name at the time. I thought this was most appropriate, but to give you some insight on some of my own, I guess, personal creativity and personal like ideas for like web building, I wanted to make a hip hop media site that was dedicated to um, positive news about hip hop artists. So a lot of the time, media outlets to get the kind of attention that they get, they usually use negative news, use drama, and yeah, I think that there's a lot of good being done by a lot of artists, even though on the surface they might look like bad people. Um, but there's a lot that they do for their communities that goes unheard of, and I think that would be it would be great if we can like emphasize and shine some light on some of those things. So these are just like kind of like dummy data that I put into this site, but just to give you an idea, I was basically using this same approach of doing the design in the front end first to build out the website, and then eventually, so I can do like the rapid prototyping that they were describing. Uh, Quickly figure out the layout to ensure that the user flow makes sense. At this point, yes, so user flow makes sense. So that's also part of it too, right? So um, getting that bird's eye view. Let me just read through this. At this point, you're not concerned with the database or flashy effects in the user interface. All you want to do is create a working mockup of the main screens and journeys that a user will take through the application. When you have a working static prototype that you're happy with, the next thing to do is look at any hard-coded data in the static application and put it in a database. The aims of this stage are to define a data model that reflects the requirements of the application, to create a database to work with the model. The first part is defining the data model. Stepping back to a bird's eye view, what are the objects that you need data about? How are the objects connected, and what data is held in them? Okay, so I'm not going to read too much into this, but this is basically stages, step by step, how the whole application is being built and the approach. So step 1, build a static site. That's the first thing that we're going to do here on this live stream is build a static site. And then step 2, design the data model and create the database. So this is when we're starting to work our way back to the back end after creating our front end, right? And then building the API, and the API is what's going to connect basically to have the database speak to our current, whatever our current site is, which is what step 4 is right there, right? And then step 5, augment the application. So they talk about user authentication and data validation. So stage 5 is the part that I haven't finished yet. So I'm hoping to work through it with you guys. Steps to build locator. You have two aims. First, of course, you want to build a working application on the main stack. Second, you want to learn about the different technologies, how to use them, how to put them together. Well, I basically talked about the same thing earlier. All right, so building a static site, building a REST API. All right, development hardware. You don't need anything particular special to run the development stack. A single laptop or even a virtual machine is enough to develop a mean application. All components of the stack can be installed on Windows, macOS, and most Linux distributions. We've successfully developed applications on Windows and macOS laptops as well as Ubuntu virtual machines. Our preference is native development on macOS, but we know others who swear by Linux virtual machines. Okay, if you have a local network and several servers, you can run different parts of the application across them. It's possible to have one machine as a database server, another for the REST API, and a third main application for code itself. For example, so long as the servers can talk to one another, the setup isn't a problem. Production hardware. Okay, so the production hardware really just going to be pushing stuff up to Heroku, and they usually take care of that stuff. That's what they're talking about here, platform as a service. So platform as a service usually covers you by providing that kind of hardware. So they'll have a server that's dedicated to your database, a server that's dedicated to your REST API, and a server dedicated to your application. They'll usually be well suited for whatever job it's performing, whether it's being your database, your REST API, or your application. And if you were building a full stack application, you wanted to scale it up, they'll also help you with that. So they're a really good solution. And that's the end of the second chapter. So the third chapter is the beginning of part 2, where we actually start doing stuff. I'm so sorry that it took so long to get to this point, but some of the background information is pretty important. But I know a lot of people just kind of want to get into the actual stuff. So we talk about model view controller environment, all this stuff. So we'll get into that as well. All right, let's get to it. All right, managing dependencies by using npm and package. Okay. You'll start building your application. Remember from chapters 1 and 2 that throughout this book you're going to build an application called Locator, a location-aware web application that displays listings near users and invites people to log in and leave reviews. Okay, so if you need to get the source code for any of this, first question. So for the 2 people that are still watching, sorry if I've dragged you along for the last 30 minutes. But do you guys have Git installed on your computers? If not, I'll show you how to get it. But if you already have it, just leave a yes in the chat and I'll continue moving forward. Well, just in case that you don't have Git installed, I will show by example. Okay, if you go to install Git, the first link that pops up is usually what you want to use. So they show how to install it on Linux here. They show how to install it on Mac OS, and they show how to install it on Windows. Right here, you go to download. Most people have 64-bit computers right now, so you click on the 64-bit setup. I'm not going to click on it. Oh, actually, the download started already, the exe file, and you just run it from there. After you have that installed, if you wanted to, you can clone what's currently in the third chapter. I usually go to my desktop for this, so you'll go to your command prompt, cmd. Let's move this to the side a little bit. Go to my OneDrive, so you get into desktop, and then I would say git clone, and I'll just copy the same exact command that they have there, p flag chapter, but I'm not going to actually do that. I don't need to right now. So if you copy the code on GitHub to run the application, you can install some dependencies with the following command. Okay. So as soon as you get this installed, or you clone the branch from Git. Oh, you don't have it already? Okay, no problem. So yes, so you go over to Git. So if I were to Google it again, I'll just say install Git. so you'll go to install and git. If you have it on Linux, you'll open up your shell the same way how I would open up CMD on Windows. Instead, you would open up your terminal, I think it's how they call it on Linux. And for Mac OS, you would open up whatever your terminal is on Mac OS. And that's how you would install it. But if you're on Windows like I am, you just click on this link here. It'll automatically start the download. It'll go down here. You run the exe. As soon as it's done installing, you should be able to just press the Windows key for your command prompt, cd into wherever you want it to be installed, and then you'd be able to copy this branch. But we shouldn't have to copy it just yet, just because we're going to be working through the examples by hand. So let's make sure. All right, yep, and this is where we're going to start with installing all the tools. So here in the mean stack, Express is the Node web application framework. Together, Node.js and Express underpin the entire stack. So you'll start there. In terms of building up the application architecture, Figure 3.1 shows where this chapter focuses. You'll do two things. Create the project in the encapsulating Express application that will house everything except the database. Set up the main Express application. So creating the encapsulating Express application and starting to set up the main Express application. And this is just a figure of where we're starting, and this is where we're starting, Express and Node.js. All right. Groundwork by looking at Express and seeing I can manage dependencies and modules by using npm and a package.json file. You'll need this background knowledge to get going and set up an Express project. Before you do anything, make sure that you have everything you need installed on your machine. When that's done, look at creating a new Express project from the command line and the various options you can specify at this point. Express is great, but you can make it better and get to know it better by tinkering a little and changing some things around. This involves a quick look at model view controller architecture. Here's where you get under the hood of Express a little and see what it's doing by modifying it to have a clear MVC setup. When the framework of Express is set up as you want it, you'll then include Twitter's Bootstrap framework and make the site responsive by updating the pub template. In the final step of this chapter, you'll push the modified responsive MVC Express application to a live URL using Heroku and Git. Alright, so hold up. Did we skip something? Okay. I'm gonna go back to this. Let me just no. Okay, creating an Express problem. Express project. We didn't skip anything. Okay, so we're gonna go over some of these details they say are important for us to get started. All right. The framework. Yep. Okay, a brief look at Express, Node, and NPM. As previously mentioned, Express is a web application framework for Node. In basic terms, an Express application is a Node application that happens to use Express as a framework. Remember from Chapter 1 that NPM is a package manager that gets installed when you install Node, which enables you to download Node modules or packages to extend the functionality of your application. But how do these things work together, and how do you use them? A key piece of the puzzle is the package.json file. Defining packages with package.json. In every Node application, you should have a file in the root folder of the application called package.json. This file can contain various metadata about a project, including the packages that it depends on to run. The following listing shows an example of a package.json file that you might find in the root of an Express project. This is an example of what it looks like, which is basically JSON data showing package names and what versions they're running as well. By the way, did you get Git installed? If not, let me know. That way I can slow down a little bit. They should be having us install Node.js next. If not, I'll just go ahead and show how to do that as well. The listing is the file in its entirety, so it's not particularly complex. Various metadata at the top of the file is followed by the dependency section. In this default installation of an Express project, quite a few dependencies are required for Express to run. But you don't need to worry about what each one does. Express itself is modular so that you can add components or upgrade them individually. Awesome. Working with dependency versions in package.json, alongside the name of each dependency is the version number that the application will use. Notice that they're prefixed with either a tilde or a caret. Take a look at the dependency definition for Express 4.16.3, which specifies a particular version at 3 levels: major version, minor version, patch version. And that's just splitting that up, explaining that. Some of this is probably not that important. Um, Installing node dependencies with npm. Any node application or module can have dependencies defined in a package.json file. Installing them is easy and is done the same way regardless of the application or module. Using a terminal prompt in the same folder as the package.json file, run the following command. This command tells npm to install all dependencies listed in the package.json file. When you run it, npm downloads all packages listed as dependencies and installs them in a specific folder in the application called node modules. Right. All right, let's adding more packages to an existing project. So this is the command that you use for adding a new package using Node Package Manager. But let's see if we can kind of skip through some of this. Creating an Express project. Yes, okay. I think here is where they start redirecting us to where we need to go. All journeys must have a starting point, which for building a mean application is creating a new Express project. To create an Express project, you'll need to have 5 key things installed in your development machine: Node and npm, the Express generator installed globally, Git, Heroku, suitable command line, interface, or terminal. So the first thing, installing the pieces, if you don't have Node, npm, or the Express generator installed yet, see Appendix A for instructions and pointers to online resources. All can be installed on Windows, Mac OS, and all mainstream Linux distributions. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. Let's see if I can control click this. So we're going to go through Appendix A real quick and follow how to install Node, npm, and the Express generator. But before doing that, make sure that you have Visual Studio Code or whatever IDE you choose to use installed. Because that's how we're going to be viewing our project, moving around the files, and editing code. So make sure you have that code editor installed. And if you do, give me a yes in the chat. If not, we will. It's the same process. You search up Visual Studio Code instead of Git, and you should be able to install Visual Studio Code. So let's look at Appendix A. Installing the stack. This appendix covers installing Node and npm, Express, MongoDB, and Angular. For now, let's do Node and npm. The best way to install Node and npm depends on your operating system. Whenever possible, we recommend that you download an installer from the Node website. So let's control click that. I'm not familiar with the website looking like this. This is probably so you can do it from the command line, but if you just do Node.js install right here, download Node.js, look for your operating system. If you go to Windows installer, automatically installs the correct version, the 64-bit version for my PC. If you need a different version of it, you can always look at it here and pick the correct version for your PC. All right. So from there, you can then, as soon as it's done installing, click it and run it, and that should install Node.js on your PC. To check if Node.js is working, you can go to your command line, cmd, and you can say node -v, that should be node version, and this is the version of Node.js I currently have installed on my PC. So I have something that's a little older, so this is the I guess the minor version, right? It's actually 13 instead of 17, which is fine. You don't have to have the absolute latest version of Node.js, but let me know if you guys have any trouble with that. You shouldn't be too much of a problem, but let me know if you got that installed. Once that's installed, it should come with npm. So if you say npm-v, you also get a version for Node Package Manager. And that should be explained here as well. So let's talk about the long-term support version of Node, LTS. That means that you won't have to switch versions for a long time, for a couple of years maybe. Explain installing Node on Windows. install from the website. On Mac OS, download an installer from the website. You can also install Node and NPM using Homebrew Package Manager. Yeah, I don't know too much about installing using Mac OS or Linux, so I recommend if they say that you can use the website, definitely use the website. Installing Node on Linux, there aren't any installers for Linux users, but you can download binaries from the Node website if you're comfortable working with them. So that I would probably wouldn't be able to help you with because I'm like I said I'm not that familiar with Linux, but um, here goes I guess a wiki page that explains um, maybe how to install Node.js on your Linux machine. Okay, moving forward. So now we have npm installed. We have to install Express. So if you go to command line and you can use npm-v, which is the version. If that works, that means you should be able to do npm install, and I'll do this one, which might just update my version of Express Generator. And you do npm install, the G stands for global, it's the flag for global, and then Express Generator. That means that it should be accessible even outside of our current working project. And you should be able to use Express in other projects as well. All right, and so for now, that's all we needed, Node, NPM, and Express. Here they explain how to do it on Mac OS or Linux. This is the command you use, sudo npm install global Express Generator. So we can close that for now. And we don't have to worry about installing MongoDB yet. Okay. And so verifying installations, right? You can do, I guess on Mac OS or Linux, you have to double dash version. All right, creating a project folder. Assuming all is good, start creating a new folder on your machine called Locator. This folder can be on your desktop, documents. Okay, so now we're starting the actual project, right? So I go to my desktop and I create a new folder. And let's just call it Locator like they told us to. And you still want to merge this folder? No, I don't want to merge this folder. So I'm going to take my current Locator project that's located on this desktop. Where is it? Sorry. Desktop, Locator, cut, and we're going to go Documents, paste, close that, and then we'll create a new one here, rename it, Locator. That should work. I don't know why it has stuff in it. Oh no, it doesn't. Okay. Well, it looks like it does. All right. And configuring Express installation. An Express project is installed from the command line, and the configuration is passed in with parameters of the command you use. If you're not familiar with using the command line, don't worry. None of what we'll go through in this book is particularly complex. And let me know if I'm going too fast or if you guys are okay with the pace right now. Because now that we're going to start, like, I guess, doing some actionable items throughout the stream, if any of you are following along actually, like, by, doing this stuff, which is fine if you're not also. But if you are, if you need me to slow down, let me know. If you're not familiar with using the command line, don't worry. None of what we'll go through in this book is particularly complex, and it's all easy to remember. Once you started using it, you'll probably love how it makes some operations so fast. You can install Express in a folder with a simple command, but don't do this yet. This command installs the framework with default settings in your current folder. This step probably is a good start, but take a look at some configuration options before we start. What can you configure when creating an Express project this way? You can specify the following: which HTML template engine to use, which CSS preprocessor to use, whether to create a git ignore file. So they're going to end up having us use Pug. So before it was called Pug, fun fact, it was actually called Jade. But I think there were some copyright issues with the naming or something like that. So they had to change the name to Pug. So you aren't going to do that here, but if you want to create a project that uses less CSS preprocessor and the handlebars template engine and includes a git ignore file, you run the following command in terminal. So what they're going to have us do is instead use a different template engine, not handlebars, but we'll be using Pug. So Pug is unusual compared with the other template engines in that it doesn't contain HTML tags in the templates. Instead, Pug takes a rather minimalist approach using tag names, indentation, and a CSS-inspired reference method to define the structure of the HTML. The exception is the divider tag. Because it's so common, if the tag name is omitted from the template, Pug assumes that you want a divider. So this is how Pug looks. Um, this is what it looks like in HTML. So both of these produce the same thing, except there's less writing here in the sense that you don't have to do both the opening and closing tag. And for if you wanted a divider, for example, this is a divider with an ID of banner and class of page header. For ID, it's just the hash symbol, and for the class, it's just the period. And so the same way you kind of write it in CSS when you're referring to, for example, an ID name or a class name in CSS, is kind of how it's written in Pug. So it's a nice minimalist approach, and um, it allows, it looks cleaner. I think it looks cleaner at least. From the first line of the input and output, you should be able to see that. Okay, yep, you can skip that. A quick intro to ignore files. I don't think we're going to be using get ignore, so that's fine. Creating an Express project and trying it out. So this is the command we're actually going to be using. So this is going to be the very start of our project. You're going to notice as soon as we run this command, everything is going to kind of start to form. You're going to kind of see, okay, this is where we're starting from. This is the actual, I guess, start point of the book. So all the background information, although important, if you're looking to just get started on just actually, I guess, doing stuff with this, after you've installed everything, this is the first command that actually creates your project. So, you know the basic command for creating an Express project and have decided to use the Pug template engine. You'll also let it generate a git ignore file for you. Now, create a new project in section 3.2.3. You should have created a new folder called locator. Navigate to this folder in terminal and run the following command. So we're going to do that now. So right now, given what we've gone over in the last, I guess, hour, we should have installed Node, which also came Node.js, which also came with npm, which is just going to the website and clicking the installer and running it. We should have also gotten our code editor, which we're going to be using soon, and yeah, and I guess also installing Git. So Git we're not going to use immediately right now, but it was good that we installed it. So if we go to the command prompt, and for me, my desktop is located on OneDrive for some reason. Go to the desktop and change directory into locator, which is a new folder we just created. We're now going to run that command. Where is it? But we're at right here. Express u equals pug git. Boom, and it's already done. Our whole project's created. Now we have to look at it. So let's open up Visual Studio Code. And right now I have it already, set to locator, so it's already opened up. But here we have our project already. Routes, views. You can take a look at some of this, and yeah, we'll minimize that for now. All right. This command creates a bunch of folders and files inside the locator folder that form the basis of your locator application. But you're not quite ready yet. Next, you need to install the dependencies. As you may remember, you do this by running the following command from a terminal prompt in the same folder as the package.json file, npm install. As soon as you run it, your terminal window lights up with all things it's downloading. When it finishes, the application is ready for a test drive. Okay, so before we do that, let's do the npm install. Now it should be installing all the dependencies that are on our current package.json file. And that current package.json file is determined by, what was created by the Express generator. Okay, minimize that. So now we're going to check to make sure the app works. In the terminal, run the following command, but if your application's in a folder with a different name, swap out locator accordingly. Okay, so we'll do npm start. All right, so let's do boom. That should be on the local host now. So if we go to close these projects out. We don't need those. Express, boom, it's already loaded. It's currently working. We got a success status code. All right, so we can close this too. All right, you should see a confirmation similar to this. This confirmation means that Express application is running. You can see it in action by opening a browser and heading over to localhost 3000. We hope that you'll see something like the screenshot in Figure 3.3. Admittedly, this isn't exactly groundbreaking stuff, but getting the Express application up and running to the point of working in the browser was easy, right? If you head back to the terminal now, you should see a couple of log statements confirming that the page has been requested and that a style sheet has been requested. To get to know Express a little better, take a look at what's going on here. How Express handles requests. Okay, so I only have one viewer left here. I know it's probably hard to stay here for a full hour. But yeah, I mean, any feedback at all, much appreciated. I would really appreciate it. Let me know, how I'm doing here. But for now, I guess I'm just gonna continue going through this content. I think an hour is pretty solid though. Maybe I might switch it from 6 to 7 instead of 6 to 8. Because 2 hours would be kind of long for going through a book, right? And people get tired at this point, I think. So, maybe I'll call it here. I'll wait till it hits 7. But I think, even though I haven't gotten any verbal feedback from anyone yet, I think this is a good experience. So I think I'm going to make these only hour-long streams whenever I do book content. I mean, there's no rush, right? I don't need to rush through all of this, but I'll have this as the only thing is today, since people are expecting 6 to 8, I did advertise 6 to 8 p.m. So yeah, sure thing, of course. Okay, so the first thing that I had everyone install was Git. So if you do install Git and you go to the first link here to install Git, if you're on Windows, it's just as simple as going to, sorry, not this link. Right here under installing Windows, you go to this download link, and it'll automatically start downloading onto your desktop. If you have a different operating system, they also explain how to install on a different operating system if you just follow the instructions here. If you are using Windows, all you have to do now is run this executable, and you should have Git working. Once you have Git installed, you also want to install Node.js. So you just type in Node.js install and look for the first link, and click whichever one you need for your given operating system. If you're on Mac, you click this one. If you're on Windows, you click this one. As soon as you run that, you should have Node.js working on your PC. To ensure that it's working, go to your command prompt, or if you're on Mac, or on Linux, you go to your terminal, and then just type in. I know at least for Windows, you should just type in node and then the V flag. But it looked like in the book they were saying if you type in node -- version, I guess that works also on Mac as well. So after Node is installed, you then want to install Express. So to install Express, I think we just went over that, right? Right here. No, sorry. Express is up here somewhere. Right there. So specifically, no, not this one. This one's using lesson handlebars. We're using Hub. Yep. So this one, we're going to go back to our command prompt. And because we're installing it globally, is this the Express generator? Well, we did something before this. Hold up. I'm missing something. Something has to have a G in it. Installing the pieces. And in a folder with a simple command. Don't do this yet. Okay, that was in the appendix. Sorry, hold on. Appendix A. There we go. Express globally right here, and then you'll go to your command prompt and you'll say npm install g flag, so that should be -g express generator, and you hit enter, and boom, you have Express installed on your PC. So at this point, you should have Express installed, Git installed, Node installed, and npm comes with Node. And I'm not sure if you have your IDE yet. I personally recommend Visual Studio Code, just because I'm used to it. But you can use any IDE that you're comfortable with, or any code editor. And yeah, from there, we go back to chapter 3, scroll down. All right, after we do all that, we start our project in Express. So at this point, we should have made also a folder on the desktop. I had a little experience with WordPress before. I haven't personally gone far enough to understand how to use WordPress. I learned a little bit of PHP, and I do understand it's usually easier to do WordPress than doing, I guess, maybe full stack development. If you wanted to do, a full website that contains content management system and everything, WordPress kind of has all that stuff already done. I ended up using this thing called Flywheel to do like local hosting. So you see how, like, for example, if you look at my command prompt here, how I'm kind of hosting it through my console. With Flywheel, it's even easier. And WordPress in general, there's a lot of extra work that doesn't have to be done over again. But maybe in the future I'll do streams on WordPress. But I think for now I want to definitely uh, do the contents of this book. And if you think about it, we're technically kind of getting through this pretty fast. I mean, within an hour in chapter 3 already, right? And we're doing some of the stuff. And we did skip a lot of, I guess, background information, but we went over some of the important parts. But if you're interested in WordPress content, definitely that's something I can do in the future, especially since it's something I'd be interested in learning as well. Um, so yeah. Um, if you're still looking for everything needed to be installed for the project, right, once you have project folder created on your desktop, you just right click, go to new folder, name it locator. I have mine up here already, so I'm not going to do it again. And then from your command prompt, you're going to go to that directory. I have too many of these open, actually. So I'm just going to control C this. But right here, I'm in that directory on the desktop locator already. And then once you're in that directory, you would do the following command, express, and then view. I'm not going to run this command again since I've done it already. I don't know if it'll mess anything up. And then double dash git, and then you enter that, and that would create your project. And now your folder structure, if you have your code editor open and you have your project open in your code editor, you'll see this is your project structure now. All these things automatically, it's already, you have some pub files here and everything. You have your routes code as well. You have the entire folder structure is already created for you. Express does all of this for you, which is what makes this so much easier instead of having to do it yourself from scratch in Node.js. So from here now, let me know, Janal, Dave, if you need any more assistance or if you need me to go over one of those again. But that was pretty much everything we've done so far. And then after you do this command as well, in your project folder, you want to hit npm install as well in there to make sure you have all of the, which I can run again, it won't do anything, to make sure that everything in the package.json file is installed. All right, everything lights up. Yep, and then we had it running. I stopped it, so let's see. We got the confirmation page, and by the way, is this good? Are you guys like cool with the way I'm going about doing this? I'm definitely taking any and all feedback. I definitely want to improve, of course. My overall goal is to kind of just go through this book content together. Even though I've done most of it already, I think that it helps me to solidify what I've learned about this subject. And also, I get to share this content with everyone else as well. So we can go through it together as well. All right, so admittedly, this isn't exactly groundbreaking stuff, but getting the Express application up and running to the point of working in a browser is easy, right? If you head back to terminal now, you see a couple of log statements confirming that the page has been requested and that a style sheet has been requested. To get to know Express a little better, take a look at what's going on here. How Express handles requests. The default Express landing page is simple. The page contains a small amount of HTML, of which some of the text content is pushed as data by the Express route. There's also a CSS file. The logs in terminal should confirm that this is what Express requested and has returned to the browser. But how? About Express middleware. The app.js file contains a bunch of lines that start with app.use somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. These lines are known as middleware. When a request comes into the application, it passes through each piece of middleware in turn. Each piece of middleware may or may not do something with the request, but it's always passed on to the next one until it reaches the application logic itself, which returns a response. Take app.use, okay? For example, this line takes an incoming request, parses out any of the cookie information, and attaches the data to the request in a way that makes it easy to reference in the controller code. You don't need to know what each piece of middleware does right now, but you may well find yourself adding to this list as you build out applications. So this abstracts a lot of the extra unnecessary things from us and makes things easier on us, basically. All requests to the Express server run through the middleware defined in the app.js file. See the sidebar about Express middleware, as well as doing other things. A default piece of middleware looks for paths to static files. When the middleware matches the path against a file, Express returns this asynchronously, ensuring that the Node.js process isn't tied up with this operation, and therefore blocking other operations. When a request runs through all the middleware, Express attempts to match the path of the request against a defined route. We'll get into this topic in a bit more detail in section 3.3.3. All right, so this is basically an overview, a visual overview of how requests from visitors get passed through and I guess where the middleware works in this part. Express runs requests through all middleware specified in app.js. I'm not going to go through all of this stuff in detail. Let's continue to hit some of those actionable items that are within this book that'll help us continue making progress. So here's one tool that I mentioned earlier into this video, maybe in the very start, first 20 minutes. NodeMon is one of the ones we're going to be installing. So we're going to install that globally. Just another step here. So you go to your command prompt. I'm going to say npm install NodeMon. All right, now we have NodeMon installed. Okay, we can get rid of this now. When the installation is finished, you'll be able to use NodeMon wherever you want. Using it is simple. Instead of typing node to start the application, you type NodeMon. So making sure that you're in the locator folder in terminal and that you stop the node process if it's still running, enter the following command. And this is just having us test that out. So if you, instead of writing, so what we wrote before was npm start, right? Instead of npm start, we just type NodeMon. And now it's currently also watching. We can go to our localhost 3000. And it's currently running. We could take a look at it. And it'll also be constantly watching our text editor to make sure that, say, for example, I make a change here. Actually, let's do that. Let's make a change. Go to our, right here. Welcome to, we'll just say you have arrived at. When we save that, it should say that save, And then when we refresh, it'll automatically change. As we see here, you have arrived at Express instead of welcome to Express. All right. Okay. So just a little example, I guess. All right. All right. So modifying Express for MVC or Model View Controller. So we're going to go over what Model View Controller is, which is also very important, by the way. Having good, application structure is very useful. So modifying Express for MVC. Firstly, what is MVC architecture? MVC architecture separates the data, which is the model, the display, which is the view, and the application logic, which is the controller. This separation aims to remove any tight coupling between the components, theoretically making code more maintainable and reusable. All that basically means is that like each part of the code is like separated. You could think of them as like Lego blocks instead of having one huge block where everything is together. Where like if let's maybe Lego blocks aren't a good example, but I'm gonna keep going with it. You let me know if it makes sense. But basically, let's say this block does a function, and if just one piece of that larger block doesn't work, like the whole thing won't work. But say it was comprised of a bunch of other little Lego blocks. If just one little Lego block doesn't work, the rest of it will continue to work. Maybe let's take a PC for example, right? Um, no, I don't know. I don't think that would be a good example. Sorry, I can't come up with a better example than Lego blocks right now. Sorry about that. But if you get the idea, basically, the idea is just to have a bunch of separated pods of code that can interact with each other, but don't have a heavy dependency on each other. So that way, if one of them does break, it doesn't ruin the entire application. A bonus is that these components fit nicely into your rapid prototype development approach and allow you to concentrate on one aspect at a time as we discuss each part of the mean stack. Whole books are dedicated to the nuances of MVC, but we won't go to that depth here. We'll keep the discussion of MVC at a high level and show you how to use it with Express to build your locator application. A bird's eye view of MVC. All right, most applications or sites that you build are designed to take an incoming request, do something with it, and return a response. At a simple level, this loop in an MVC architecture works like this. A request comes into the application. The request gets routed to a controller. The controller, if necessary, makes a request to the model. The model responds to the controller. The controller merges the view and the data to form a response. The controller sends the generated response to the original requester. In reality, depending on your setup, the controller may compile the view before sending the response to the visitor. The effect is the same though, so keep this simple flow in mind as a visual for what will happen in your locator application. All right, so this is a basic picture of kind of that same flow we were talking about. Somebody makes a request to your website. It gets routed to a controller, and then the controller might make a request to the model, which is the database, and the model will give a response back to the request. To the controller. Controller merges data with the view and gives that back to the viewer who's looking at it or requested the information. All right, so we're changing the folder structure now to match that model view controller structure. So if you look inside the newly created Express project in the locator folder, you should see a file structure including a views folder and even a routes folder, but no mention of models or controllers. Rather than cluttering the root level of the application with some new folders, keep things tidy by creating one new folder for all your MVC architecture. Follow these 3 quick steps. Create a new folder called App Server. In App Server, create 2 new folders called Models and Controllers. Move the views and routes from folders from the root of the application into the App Server folder. Okay, so we're about to make this folder called App Server, and we're just going to move all of those things inside and create 2 new folders as well. We need to create models and controllers. So let's do that now. Let's go to click on that and say new folder. No. Hold up. I don't want to go to the top level of this. I don't want to create a new folder there. Folder. There we go. And see App Server. And in app server, we're going to create 2 new files. Controller. Oh, sorry, not files, folders. Delete. Yep. Folder. Controller. What now? No. That is confusing. Hold up. Let's just do this the old-fashioned way. We're just gonna click on this. We're gonna go to desktop, and we're gonna go to locator, and we have app server here now. We're gonna say create new folder, controller, create another new folder, model, and then we're gonna take the routes and the views. Control click, click, Control X. Oh, wait a minute. Hold up. Cancel. Control click, click. Cut. Okay. That didn't have to be that difficult. And now we have everything moves under app server, which is our goal. So look at it. That's exactly how I have it set up. All right, and we have to change something in our app.js file. So Express will be looking for views, but it needs to look for /app server views. Changing the path is simple, and the app is find the following line and change it to that. Okay, so we go to deleted. What is deleted? Nothing should be deleted. Okay, all right, let's go here and right here. So instead, it should say app server. And that should be it. The application still won't work. Oh, sorry. Won't work because you moved the routes, so tell Express about them too. So wherever it says constant index router, constant users router, and we need to look for so we'll change that as well. Where is that at? Index router, users router. What do they want us to change it to? App server. Same thing here. And it's done. Again, let me know if I'm moving too fast. I can always slow down. But right now what we're doing is we're just setting up the application to be in model view controller format. So on to the next thing, defining variables in ES 2015. Okay, this is just explaining, if you're familiar with JavaScript, the older version of JavaScript only used the var or var keyword, which is now, I guess, deprecated in ES 2015, which just stands for ECMAScript 2015, which is just a new version of JavaScript. It's also known as ES6. And so now we use instead constant or let. So const is just if you want a variable that does not change in value after being instantiated, and let is if you want a variable that can change in value after being instantiated. That's all that is. All right, so we can skip that. Splitting controllers from routes. Oh, it also has something to do with I think defining things globally and locally. If you're used to programming languages, I think with var, there's no, I think they ignore whether or not you're defining the variable globally or locally. But with let, there is scoping. Actually, let's look at this. Hold on. Did they mention that? One other thing to bear in mind is that constant and let are block level variable initializers, whereas var is a context level variable initializer. If these terms mean nothing to you, read appendix D available. Yeah, okay, we don't have to go through that. We'll leave this alone for now. All right. Splitting controllers from routes. So, in a default Express setup, controllers are part of the routes. but you want to separate them out. Controllers should manage the application logic, and routing should map URL requests to controllers. To understand how routes work, take a look at the route already set up for delivering the default Express homepage. Inside index.js and app server /routes, you should see the following code snippet. Alright, it shows the code snippet. And we look at our routes folder, we'll look at that soon. And by the way, I think so. This has been going on for about an hour and a half. I think it's fair to say that 2 hours is a stretch, kind of long, especially this, for your first stream too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it here. I think this is a good spot to leave it off at, and I'm gonna be streaming again on Thursday. I don't know how to get the word out that it's gonna be changing from 6 to 7 as opposed to 6 to 8, because 2 hours is quite long for information this like densely packed. Especially since I'm skipping some stuff where we're getting into. But I think this is a good start. I mean, definitely let me know. I have a bunch of different links and social media pages. If you want to get the book, by the way, too, there's a link on it on my Twitch channel. If you go in the info section, whether you're watching on your phone or your computer, you should go to the info section. You can join the Discord channels. You can join, Facebook page, Instagram, all that stuff. If you want to interact and just ask questions in general. But yeah, I think I'm gonna call it quits here. I think from here we got an idea of uh, what we're gonna be working on with this stream, or how this workshop is basically based on. Basically, the curriculum is the book itself, but what's cool is that I'm going through it um, live. So if anyone had questions or they want to work on it with me and follow the examples, it's a good way to, I guess, get involved with it. But I think 2 hours is definitely too much. No one wants to sit here for 2 hours and listen to somebody read a book. So I would like to play music too alongside with this, but like Twitch will mute my streams, which will suck. So they won't really be like replayable. But if you want to rewatch any part of this, the stream will go back up on my Twitch channel, and you can replay through it and skip to whatever parts you need. I also might put this on my YouTube channel, but I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. So, but for now, yeah, I'm gonna end the stream here. I do appreciate anyone who's been watching so far. Um, I'll feel bad if someone comes in like around this time. They're like, "Oh, what happened to the stream? I thought it was gonna be here until 8 p.m. and I'm not streaming." That's the only thing I'm concerned about, like how I'm gonna do this moving forward. But um, yeah, any feedback's greatly appreciated. If you want to leave it on social media, I appreciate that too. And I hope you guys enjoyed the stream.